If you are new to our channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button.
A number of questions come in. You can certainly email us at twvgshow@gmail.com. You can dump it on Twitter at twvgshow. You can also hashtag it at hashtag twvg. Let's see here. Kathy emailed us and said, do you have any advice, or she actually came through our Facebook page, the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener, on that. Do you have any advice on purchasing a pressure canner or pressure cooker? I have never used one before, but I have water bath can for years. So first of all, there's a difference between pressure cooker and pressure canner, correct?
Right. I think she probably meant pressure canner.
Okay.
Because if she's talking about water bath canning, she's talking about taking the next step to pressure canning. I would just say to go to your best search engine, search how to shop for a pressure canner. I found some really great links I provided for her. You definitely want to think about the size, how much you're canning, how much you want to invest, all of that.
Okay. The investment, you can do very small, or you can do several $100s on the size of the canner and what you're intending to do with that. Let's go to the IB Organics 3-in-1 Plant Guard hotline. And caller, you were on the air.
Thank you for taking my call. Good morning, Joe. Good morning, Holly.
Good morning,
Milwaukee. Good morning, man, Mr. Debo. Tyrone W. speaking. Just a couple of things real quick. I would like for you to expound on the potato. Well, you were speaking about the refrigerators and freezers there. And I know those trays at the bottom. For years I have put my onions and my potatoes in the refrigerator, for at least until they were ready to use. I know at some time over the years, they're mainly my mom, but not me, because I mash potatoes, French fries, scallop, all of it, so I cook mine usually right away. But sometimes she would leave hers in there till they would wrinkle some. Now, I would think maybe that's what you were talking about. But if you could expound, why would you say never refrigerate potatoes, that, and then I'll listen to you over the air, but then, because I would put my cucumbers, my onions, even sometimes some of my fruit and stuff, in the refrigerator, like my nectarines, and occasionally maybe an apple or something like that. But the nectarines, the plums, they highlight, they give a wonderful smell to the room. The apples, the different variety of apples like the McIntosh and the Granny Smiths. So I like to put those in bowls sometimes, but sometimes to keep the flies and stuff off of them, I will refrigerate them, just to keep some of the insects from coming indoors, getting on them, even though all you have to do is just wash those off,
Sure.
But,
yeah. So,
And I'll hang up and listen to you over the air. So wonderful day and great weekend then.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
So
okay,
about
so the reason
the potatoes,
you don't want to store the potatoes in the fridge, potatoes are starch. They're considered a starch or a carb, but because they are very high in starch, what happens when you put it in the fridge is the molecular contents change and the sugar increases. So the sugars in that potato change, but it increases. So now you are taking a starchy food and creating more starch, essentially. And then when you cook them, it might take them longer to cook, different ways of cooking. So that's why you don't want to store them in the fridge.
Okay, so, but when we do store...
But you can store apples and stuff in the fridge.
Right, but when we store any of that, like we talked about earlier, we want to store it with the dirt on to actually put a barrier or a safety around it or protection, whether we're storing in a rack or in the bottom of the cabinet or whatever the case is.
Right.
But again, we don't store them in the fridge because of the high, or it creates what now?
It increases the sugar levels.
Okay, okay. So that being said. Charlie from the New York area. He is a avid listener to the program as well as viewer on our YouTube channel, the in-studio video and audio of the show. He says, congrats on 60 shows and 60 more, referencing last week. Was our 60th, a couple of weeks ago, was our 60th program that we've done here on the radio show. So we thank you for that, and we thank you for listening. Like I said, he's in the New York area. We have listeners all over the country, Canada, and throughout the world as I look at the data that comes in on where our show gets downloaded at. It's really quite unique and amazing to me. Rose writes in from southeast Louisiana and says hello. So, again, all over the place. All right, another canning question here. I recently did some water bath canning, and when I pulled the jars out of the water bath canner, I noticed that several of them were pinched or puckered up in the center like a small V. What is going on, and what did I do wrong? Well, that is an indication whenever you remove the jar from the canner and you see it's bent up like you would have taken the lid and just try to press your fingers on each side and then compress it and make it like V up, I guess is the best term. It's because your rings are on too tight. If you tighten your rings too tight, the pressure inside of the jar cannot release. When in the water bath canner, the science that goes on in the water bath canner, as the temperature rises, there is a certain amount of air, which is called the head space on these jars. When you put the material in the jar, it says X amount of head space is needed. Well, if your jar lid is tightened down too tight during the canning process, and this can happen in pressure canning as well, the air cannot escape to create the vacuum that is needed to seal the jar properly. So that's what occurs. The air escapes out of the jar, and then when you remove it from the item in which the water bath canner, the pressure canner, you hear that pop that you're associating with the jar being sealed. If it's too tight, the jar will not seal because there's still pressure that has built up inside of that jar that cannot release because you've cranked the jar too tight. So a general rule of thumb, whenever we are canning items, put the lid on and put the ring on finger tight. We're not barreling it down extremely tight, just finger tight, and then it will can properly. So that takes us to the point of proper and safe canning practices. Always read the Ball Blue book, the Better Homes and Garden book, those type of instructional manuals that have the instructions and the recipes in it, because they go through what you have to do in order to do it safely. And just because it puckered up doesn't mean you can slap another lid on, crank the ring on, and you're done. It doesn't work that way. You've got to follow the directions and do it correctly and do it safely. So it's. Thank you for checking out the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener radio show. For more, go to the WisconsinVegetableGardener.com for full-length in-studio video and podcast replay of Season 1. Season 2 underway and added weekly. Tweet us at TWVG Show or hashtag TWVG to be part of the program.